Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Do you want to play all current games at 1080p, 60 frames per second, high detail or better? Do you want to play most current games at 1440p or even 4K? Do you want a computer with future upgradability built with parts that you chose that are fit to your needs? Then you've come to the right place. This is a $900 custom build featuring the Ryzen 5 2600X CPU, 6 cores, 12 threads, up to 4.2 gigahertz. We have an X470 motherboard, great today and great for future upgradability. We have the awesome new GTX 1660 Ti featuring GDDR6 memory, great for higher resolutions. I have tested this at 1440p and 4K, and in some games it actually does quite well there. We have 16 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM, a nearly 1 terabyte SSD, 450 watt, 80 plus bronze certified power supply, and then we have a very nice Cooler Master MasterBox 500 case, mesh in the front, mesh on the top, mesh, well, exhaust in the back, 3 RGB fans included, 6 drive mounting points. It's a really nice case for under $100. If you're a regular watcher of my videos, you might have seen these parts before. I've previously covered a $900 pre-built computer from CyberPower. Now that's an Intel build with an i5-9400, but it has the same video card in it, similar case, not quite as nice, similar components, not quite as nice, but it does come pre-assembled and ready to run. This is a better deal if you don't mind building the computer yourself. There will be benchmarks coming in the future between that $900 pre-built and this $900 custom build, basically saying if you have $900, how much more do you get for your money? How much faster does it really run to build this as opposed to that? That'll be coming up in a future video. If you're not subscribed to my channel, well, that's what the big huge red button is there for. Be sure to hit the bell notification icon next to it, because frankly, if you don't, YouTube doesn't notify you of my future videos anyway, as much as I appreciate the sub. There will be a link to a playlist down in the video description below that has all the videos that I do on this build. There will be multiple videos coming up. I'll have a detailed overhead camera build video putting all these components together. It's not in this video. This is a parts overview and an options selection. Because this is a custom PC, you don't have to use this motherboard or this specific video card. You can change the storage around. You can change the power supply around. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to go through each component. I'm going to offer you a couple of different options. For example, Ryzen 5 2600X. It's a great deal at under $200 when I'm filming this video. For a little under $300 or $100 more, you can get a Ryzen 7 2700X. Very similar clock speed, maybe 100 megahertz faster on the Ryzen 7, a little bit nicer cooler with the Wraith Prism, but it's $100 more for 2 more cores and 4 more threads. Do you need a Ryzen 7? Most of you don't, some of you do, but some of you will grow into a Ryzen 7. For $100 now, you don't have to mess around with your CPU 2 or 3 years from now. You can instead just get 8 cores today and you will grow into it. I'm firmly of the belief that 8 cores is the future for mainstream desktop computers, just the way 4 cores has been the mainstream for 10 years now. The 6-core processors will certainly be viable for at least the next 3 years, and if you plan on upgrading that time, sure, a Ryzen 5 is just fine. But if you want a 5-year lifespan or more, then I think a Ryzen 7 makes more sense. That's an example of the kind of options that I want to talk about, the pros and cons of spending the extra $100 versus saving it, or maybe putting that extra $100 somewhere else. After all, instead of the Ryzen 7, you could get a faster graphics card or more RAM or more storage or a nicer case or a nicer power supply. Everything is options. Unless you have a $3,000 budget to build an ultimate gaming PC, in which case you could just buy the best of everything, everything is a series of compromises and choices. And so build guides like this are meant to help you make choices of components. Do you buy a premium factory overclocked video card, or do you just buy the base card? That sort of thing. Now, at the beginning of the video, I said this computer will play everything on the market at 1080p high detail 60 frames per second. I know that because I know what a Ryzen 5 can do, and I know what this GTX 1660 Ti can do, and so I'm very comfortable making that statement. It will play most games better than that. Either higher frame rates at low resolution at 1080p, I call 1080p low these days, some of you do, some of you don't, but at 1440p, you might be surprised. Quite a few games will play between 60 to 100 frames per second with no issues at 1440p, even a 1440p ultra-wide. It will even do some gaming at 4K. Spoiler alert, Grand Theft Auto 5, high detail, 4K, plays very nicely on this level of hardware. Granted, that game is a couple of years old now, so it's not exactly Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but that's what the future benchmarks comparing this and that CyberPower I mentioned coming out, linked in the description below when they publish, are for. So the first thing we're going to talk about today in your build choice is your CPU. Now, I frankly already covered this a minute ago when I gave it to you as an example. I do believe that a Ryzen 7 has more future-proofing in it, but that may or may not matter depending upon whether or not you want to upgrade to one of the Zen 2 chips that are coming either this summer or the Zen 2 Plus chips coming in the summer of 2020. You will be able to install those on the existing 300 or 400 series motherboards with BIOS updates. Whether or not all the boards support over 8 cores is an open question. The current rumors are that AMD is preparing 12 and 16 core chips for the consumer AM4 desktop platform, but they may or may not work in all existing boards. The future 8-core chips will, but whether all the 12 and 16 core high power chips will is open to debate. If you have a super premium expensive motherboard, they will, but you're not going to have such a motherboard in the $900 build. I would not go below this chip. Right now when I'm filming this video in March of 2019, the 2600X is $20 more expensive than the 2600. What's the difference, you ask? About 300 megahertz clock speed out of the box and a better cooler. This is the Wraith Spire cooler, and it is far superior to the Wraith Stealth that comes with the 2600. At launch, there was a much larger price difference between the X and the non-X chip, but right now, if there's only a $20 or $30 price difference, get the X chip all day long. System memory. DDR4-3200 is the ideal choice for Ryzen. 3000's okay. 2666 is all right. It's not a huge difference, but there's currently also not a large price difference between them either. On the day I filmed this video, there was like an $11 price difference between those 3 RAM speeds. Once you've chosen your CPU, then you need to pick your motherboard to install it on. Now, the $900 budget for this build is actually the B450 version of the MSI Gaming Plus. I don't have a B450 MSI Gaming Plus. I have an X470 MSI Gaming Plus. Why? MSI was nice enough to send this to me. Who am I to argue? This is about $30 more expensive. If you think you will upgrade to an 8 or maybe 12 core chip when Zen 2 or Zen 2 Plus comes out and you want to have a little bit more future proofing in your system, spend the extra $30, get the X470. It does support SLI, but I don't think that's the important part. The more important part is better power delivery, better features, and this is true of any board that you buy. You spend an extra $30 or $40, you're going to get better sound, better LAN, more USB ports, more SATA ports, etc. Having said that, if you plan to buy a Ryzen 5 2600X and you plan to keep it for the next 3 to 5 years, maybe you don't care about playing every latest and greatest game that comes out, get the B450 version. That's a great place to save $30 that you will not notice on a CPU like this. And speaking of motherboards, while MSI was nice enough to send this to me, I love all the 4 major brands: ASUS, ASRock, MSI, and Gigabyte. Any of their $100 B450 boards are great choices for a system build like this. I would not go down to the $70 boards. I think you give up too much at the $70, unless it's on sale. But at the $100 price point, you get good audio, good LAN, good power delivery, good expansion options, good USB options, they're nice, well-rounded boards. At the $70 price point, they strip all the stuff off the board. It doesn't affect performance, but it does affect what you can do with the system in the future. It affects the quality of life with the board. And frankly, I think $100 is a good price to spend on a motherboard for a $900 system. I don't think it makes sense to spend a lot more than that. Some people say, well, should I buy a better board? Won't that help the system run faster? It will not. You can spend $200 on a board. It really is wasted on a system like this. With the CPU and motherboard picked out, next up we need some system RAM. In my opinion, right now in 2019, there is one choice and one choice only: 16 gigabytes of DDR4-3200. It is slightly more expensive than 3000. If you have 3000 laying around, don't go buy 3200. Use your 3000. Frankly, if you have 16 gigs of DDR4-2666 laying around, use that. Don't go out and change your RAM for that. But if you're buying new, the price difference is very small, the cost of lunch between the various RAM speeds right now, and 3200 is now very well supported on all the boards with updated current BIOSes. Any RAM speed issues that Ryzen had, yeah, those were back closer to launch in 2017 and early 2018. They are long gone now in 2019. Do not go with 8 gigs of RAM. If you're buying a 6-core 12-thread processor and you have a $900 budget in 2019, 16 gigs of RAM is just under $100. You save $40 by going to 8. Don't cripple your system by trying to save yourself $40. Get 16 gigs, it'll last you a good long while. Likewise, I don't think 32 gigs is needed either. If you actually need 32 gigs of RAM, you also need a Ryzen 7 and your whole budget needs to come up a bit. 32 gigs is useful for people who live stream using one computer, for people who also want to do content creation, video editing, 3D animation, and if you're doing all that, you'd be on a Ryzen 7. So it's 16 gigs and that's pretty much it. Next up, we have our system storage. I firmly believe that at the current price of SSDs, a very wise choice is 1 terabyte of boot SSD space. You can currently buy several different 1 terabyte SSDs for about $100. Yes, you can save yourself about $40 or $45 by going to a 500 gig drive, and then you can buy a second hard drive to store your games and programs on, and that's an option some people will take. But games are getting bigger and games run and update faster and everything is just much nicer on SSDs. If you've got a $900 build, yes, it's $100. But if you're spending nearly $200 on your CPU, you're spending $100 on your motherboard, nearly $300 on your graphics card, spend the $100 on the SSD. Get a big 1 terabyte boot SSD. Put your most used games, applications, programs, Windows, everything on it. It'll be a quick, snappy, responsive system that you'll enjoy for many years to come. And of course, you can always add more if you need more space in the future. The alternative option to this is to get a 500 gig SSD in the $60 price range and then spend $50 or $60 on a 2 or 3 terabyte hard drive if you really need more than 1 terabyte of space. Now you can buy this plus a hard drive, but we're trying to stay within budget, so we'll talk about alternatives. I do not believe that you should go smaller than a 500 gig drive. You only save about $30 going from 500 gigs to 250 gigs. Those drives are slower. Between 500 and a terabyte, the speed is about the same, but when you go below 500 on modern drives, your speed and performance starts to drop off. And don't even think about going to a 120 on a system like this. Those drives legitimately are slower. They have less life in front of them, and nothing fits on a 120 anymore except for basic PCs. And if you're building this, it's not a basic PC. So, in my opinion, your choice is between a 500 gig and a 1 terabyte drive, and whether or not you add a hard drive to that is personal preference. At this price point, I wouldn't worry too much about NVMe. It's nice, but unless you find a really good deal or perhaps go with one of the new QLC drives such as the Intel 660p, those cost 50% more for the same capacity, and that money is better put elsewhere, such as your graphics card. So I would go with the SATA drive. There's several available. I'll link all those down below. I would go for capacity more than speed at this price point. That brings us to perhaps the most important part of any gaming PC, the video card. The new GTX 1660 Ti with the faster GDDR6, which will help tremendously with larger textures coming in future games or running at higher resolutions. You don't need the GDDR6 today necessarily for 1080p gaming, although in the future with larger games, larger textures you might, and even today for larger resolutions it certainly comes in helpful. You can save a little bit of money by going down to the non-TI version. I don't really think it's worth it. The price to performance is a little bit better for the non-TI version, but you're not saving much and you're giving up the faster RAM, which you might wish you had in the future. You could also step up to the RTX 2060. If you want one of the free games that NVIDIA is currently offering on the RTX 2060, then that's an easy decision. There's about a $70 price difference between this card and an RTX 2060. Price to performance, this is a little bit better, not tremendously so, but it's a bit better. However, when I'm filming this video, the RTX cards come with your choice of Metro Exodus, Battlefield 5, or Anthem. Those games are $50-ish. The $70 price difference is almost completely eaten up by that. So if you want one of those games, run, don't walk, and get an RTX 2060. In talking about graphics cards, this brings up a point which I'm sure many of you are either thinking about or already down in the comment section wanting to say, wait a minute, with a $900 budget, you can buy a much better graphics card than a GTX 1660 Ti. You are absolutely correct. You could, if you want to, fit an RTX 2070 into this build. You'd have to make a lot of sacrifices to do it, but you could fit it in here. You'd have to give up RAM, storage, motherboard quality, case quality, maybe power supply quality. You'd give up a lot to get there, probably going to the non-X chip to save 20 bucks here, 20 bucks there, 20 bucks there, but you could fit an RTX 2070 in here. Performance-wise, that legitimately would be faster than this in most situations. However, the graphics card is the easiest thing to change outside of maybe system RAM in your computer. You can, in a year or two, if you're fixed at a $900 budget, you can always upgrade your graphics card. You just undo 2 screws, take it out, put a new card in, and you're good to go. If you buy a super cheap case and a super cheap power supply and a bottom of the barrel motherboard and a bottom of the barrel SSD, or worse, no SSD at all, which as far as I'm concerned isn't even an option. But if you do that, yes, you'll have a faster graphics card. Yes, your games will be a little bit faster today, although watch the benchmarks. I think you'll be impressed at just how fast this really is for most games. When you want to upgrade your graphics card in the future, you have a really crappy computer with it built around. Putting a $500 video card around a bunch of super cheap bottom of the barrel components, that just seems wrong to me somehow. I know some people do it. People go, all I care about is how fast is my graphics card and I don't care about the rest of my computer. Well, custom PCs are custom. You build this however the heck you want to build it. I personally think that's a crying shame. Build a nice balanced computer with good quality mid-range components all the way around, and you'll have a solid foundation for future growth and expansion. You could easily keep this case through your next 2 or 3 computer upgrades. You could easily keep this motherboard through your next CPU upgrade, getting a Zen 2 or Zen Plus CPU, maybe 12, potentially even 16 cores. You can add more storage in this. Well, we'll talk about the power supply in a minute, but you could take this computer with you a long, long way. You could always change your graphics card, but you can't change the foundation of your computer. Now that's going up the graphics card scale. What about going down? One of the questions some of you may be asking is, why not just get an RX 580? Aren't those great for 1080p gaming? Maybe you don't care about 1440p or 4K. Maybe you don't care about ultra detail. You just want something inexpensive that works today. Maybe you want to go ahead and get a better power supply or a better CPU or something else, or maybe you want to cut the budget by $100 or $200. No problem. For nearly $100 less than the 1660 Ti, you can get an RX 580. An RX 580 is not as fast as this card. It has GDDR5 instead of GDDR6, so the memory is slower. So as games get larger and larger textures, yes, it has 8 gigs of VRAM, but it's slower VRAM, and that's going to eat into the card going forward. This is an old design dating back multiple years. It's basically a shrink of an R9 290X that was launched more than 5 years ago at this point, although this card obviously isn't that old. It is under $200 and it does come with a couple of games. It's a great card and there's nothing wrong with it. It will need an upgrade sooner than this will. So spend more, get more. We'll talk about the case last. Cases are very personal choices. Let's talk about the power supply. This power supply has often been available for under $30. It is a 450 watt, 3-year warranty, 80+ bronze certified EVGA unit. If you've watched my channel for a while, you've seen me use several of these. They're great values for budget to mid-range builds. If there's anything in this build that I personally would recommend changing first, it actually might be the power supply. The only reason for that is in terms of noise and power efficiency. This is an 80+ bronze, and it's not going to be an ultra silent power supply. And while it has plenty of power for this build, excessive power for this build, if you do want to upgrade to say a 12 or 16 core chip, if you want to upgrade to a higher end $500, $700 card in the future, add some more drives, you're starting to push what this power supply is really appropriate for. Depending upon what kind of deal you find, these are absolutely wonderful. I have used these several times in the past. These are G3 80+ golds from EVGA. They are more expensive, typically twice the price of this. Although they've been on sale several times. I got a couple of these for really cheap back on Black Friday. If you can find something like a G3 or even a G2 from EVGA or something similar, Corsair, for example, their RMX power supplies would be very similar to this. If you get something like this, you have more reserve for the future. You have zero fan speed noise. So basically, unless the computer's under load, the fan doesn't turn, they're completely silent. It's fully modular. It's got a much longer warranty. It's a much higher quality unit. This is overkill for this, unless you want the ability to upgrade it substantially in the future. If you buy this wanting to grow it dramatically, maybe your goal is to start with a $1,000 computer today and end up with a $2,000 computer 2 years from now, because you're going to go to a 12 or 16 core chip, you're going to go to a higher end 70 or 80 series video card, you're going to add more stuff to it. Yeah, this makes total sense. Otherwise, I wouldn't. That simply brings us to the case choice. This is a $75 case, and for a $1,000 computer, it's all you need to buy. Anything more than this is overkill. Now, if you don't like Cooler Master for whatever reason, or you don't like the design, or you want more glass on it or something else, fair enough. I absolutely understand. This does have a very nice mesh front. These are two RGB fans in the front. They can be turned off if you want, but there are two RGB fronts. There's one in the back. There are places for 6 drives inside, both 2.5 and 3.5 inch drives. Very nice. There's no 5 1/4 inch bay, but you got your front panel controls, mesh on the top for exhaust out the top. You can install liquid coolers in this. It's a nice $75 case. But there are many other choices from Fractal Design and NZXT and so many other companies, it's just not even funny. It is worth noting that the advice that I gave you on the power supply applies to your case. If you plan on building a $900 to $1,000 build and keeping it that way for a while and maybe just upgrading in place, maybe you'll keep the video card for 3 years and then you'll upgrade to whatever is the then new $300 video card. This is fine. You don't need any more case than this if that's your goal. If, on the other hand, your goal is to grow it to a $2,000 build, to go to the higher core count chips, to go to the higher level $500, $700 video card, yeah, then spending $100, $150 on a case makes sense. The upgrade from this would be, for example, the Cooler Master H500. It's not the MasterBox line, it's just the H500. It has 200mm fans in the front. It is straight mesh all the way down. There is more ventilation. The case is physically thicker, leaving more room behind the motherboard. It's longer, it's taller, it's nicer all the way around. I did the Ryzen 5 2600 build in that last year. Absolutely love that case. Very, very nice. But it costs more. In order to fit all of this into the $900 price point, you got to find compromises to make things make sense. This does fit within that budget. Go to an H500 and there's an extra $25 that you've got to pull out of something else, unless you increase your budget. Speaking of budgets, spending $1,100 gets you a lot more computer than $900 does if you take this as a base point. $30 more for this motherboard. A Ryzen 7 2700X instead of a 2600X gets you 8 cores, 16 threads. The H500 case for $25 more gets you better airflow, larger, thicker, wider, taller, everything. The 80 Plus Gold fully modular power supply for future upgradability. An RTX 2060 instead of a GTX 1660 Ti. You can upgrade little pieces of it all over. For 20% of the price of your computer, everything's just a bit nicer. It isn't necessarily going to make it monstrously faster. An RTX 2060 is 15 to 20% faster than the 1660 Ti, which in itself is plenty fast for most people. A Ryzen 7 today isn't going to make a difference over a Ryzen 5 for most people, but it's future-proofing. It gives you something to grow into. A nicer motherboard, same thing. A nicer case, nicer power. These are personal choices. You ultimately have to decide, do you have a fixed firm budget that you can't budge from and you've got to move, basically rearrange the deck chairs to figure out what am I going to be able to buy within this budget? What do I want to give up here or give up there? Or do you have a flexible budget? Are you looking at maybe $900, but once you look at it, you go, wait a minute, for an extra $100 or $200, I can kind of really upgrade everything and uplift this entire build and make it very, very nice. That's a decision that only you can answer. Linked down in the description below, I'm going to put all these parts that I've been discussing as well as several alternatives down there. I do that in all of my videos. If you've watched this long into this and this is not your first video you've watched, then you know this already about me. Those are affiliate links down there. They support the channel at no extra cost to you. I don't do a lot of sponsored spots. I do get sent product samples from time to time. Speaking of which, this motherboard, this RAM, this SSD, and this case were all sent to me by the companies involved. I bought the CPU, I bought the video card, and I bought the power supply. None of this is sponsored. They're just samples that companies send me to include in videos like this. However, I have been buying this stuff since before I got sent samples. If you go back in 2016 and watch my original videos I did when my channel was small, I was using Cooler Master cases back then. I built an i7-7700K in a Cooler Master case back then, long before they ever sent me anything. EVGA power supplies. I got a whole video comparing 8 different power supplies from them back then. So I get samples sent to me from companies that I would spend and have spent my own money on. So that being said, like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you've loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with a big, huge red button directly below. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, suggestions, polite criticism, always welcome. Let me know what you would build. How would you spend $900? It's all right if you disagree with me. Tell me what you think. Put what you would build down in the comment section below. I don't respond to every comment down there, but I promise you I do read them all. Links in the video description to the full playlist on this build. Next video on this will be the overhead camera. In fact, when I stop recording this, the first thing I'm going to do is turn the overhead camera on and build the thing. I'll edit them and obviously publish them on separate days, but it'll be coming up very, very soon. And then my social media links down below as well. Thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully this has been helpful for you, and I will see you next time.